Hi, everyone. I hope you can see me. I hope you can hear me. I hope you're there on this bright and beautiful September morning. After a few more people get here, we'll start our gathering and then our story. So for folks who are already here, I've got a question to ask you. I'm wondering if you've ever gone to a farm or orchard and picked the fruit there. It's the month of September now, and in September, a lot of people go to apple orchards and pick apples if they live around here in Massachusetts. Of course, that only happens if there's no pandemic and if it's not raining. And so you're probably not going to go pick apples this month, or you probably haven't, but maybe you've gone in other Septembers. Have you ever gone to pick apples off of apple trees? Have you eaten donuts in the fall? Oh, Julia says that she's picked peaches and cherries on the West Coast. Yeah, later on when we're telling our story, there's going to be a little bit of conversation about what kinds of fruit trees and plants grow in different parts. Duncan says he has picked apples. And Nathaniel says he's picked peaches, or the whole family has. Oh my goodness, the Gotti family are here and they are going apple picking today. Oh, this is so exciting because you'll get a little preview to your apple picking in today's story. Oh my goodness, and the Gottis had donuts. There are donuts that are going to appear in this story. This is so, of the moment. Oh, Juliet did an apple comparison last year, and Honeycrisp won. I'm a big Honeycrisp fan. That crispness is all. I know there are people out there who like Macintosh apples, and I'm not quite sure I get that. But everybody has their own favorite apple, it seems, especially around here where apples are big and people have opinions. One of my kids has a favorite apple, which is a Macoun, which is a hybrid cross between Macintosh apples and I think Cortland apples. Duncan went apple picking, and while he was apple picking, at some point on that day's adventure, he had donuts. Yeah, I always like to combine donuts and apples. And I actually like many, many kinds of apples. Not very picky about that, but I'm really picky about my cider donuts. So if you want to know the place that I think has the best cider donuts, you can ask me in the chat. Or we could just leave that till the end of today's lesson. Oh, Matt likes Empire apples. Yes, I like those too. They're really dark red. He's not big on the Empire name, though, which I understand completely. Although I came from New York, which maybe it was called the Empire State. Is that its nickname? I don't know. So I have a little bit of a empire sometimes just means home to me rather than imperialism and, lots of folks telling lots of other folks what to do. Oh, Julia got 10 different apples at an orchard with choices. My goodness, that's a lot in one orchard and all to come ripe at the same time so you can try them all. I'd like to know what that orchard is. And I see that Matt is asking about where the good cider donuts are. All right, well, I might trade information here. If I find out what orchard lets you taste test 10 different kinds of apples, I'll just tell you anyway where the good cider donuts. They are at Goodale Orchards in Ipswich. And they're in Ipswich Town Center. There's a really nice cafe for people who need extra coffee when they're driving back after a long day. Julia is opting for cider donuts, the best she's ever had being in North Carolina. This sounds, I don't know, this sounds dubious. North Carolina having cider donuts? Do they even grow apples there? Oh, and she suggests Eli's in Warren, Rhode Island. Okay. Sometime we'll have to have a cider donut taste off, just like Juliet had an apple taste off. But I don't know how we're going to, manage that. Okay. A lot of us seem to be here, so I'm going to ring the timer. And let's see how that works. I forgot. It's been a while. Okay, I'm going to ring the timer and I'm going to hold my thumb up like this. And then when I can't hear it anymore, I'll go like that. And you can do the same thing. Oh, but first I'll say that Kate is reminding us that we often have cider donuts on school registration day in September. Yes, and Kate is often the one who brings them in. And I think maybe some people, or she has brought in cider as well. That is one of my favorite parts of school registration, actually. And Juliet says that her favorite cider donut is at Smith Farm in Bridgewater. And Julia says that North Carolina has maple bacon donuts too. Oh my goodness. Bacon donuts. Yeah. Okay. Maple bacon donuts. It sounds positively Canadian. One of my kids went to college in Canada, and maple and bacon seem to be big there. Oh, Kate says that Union Square Donuts has maple bacon donuts. I am so sorry to hear about that, Kate, because that's quite close to me, and it might lead me astray. But when the best cider donuts are all the way on the North Shore in Ipswich, I'm relatively safe. Hey, the Wilmers or Dwilmers are here, and Johnny. Hey, Johnny, nice to see you. Not nice to see you because you can only see me, but nice to know you're out there. Oh, Johnny's getting hungry. Okay, I should have warned everybody that there was a high risk of hunger with today's lesson. Oh well, just be brave and power on through, and there'll be food at the other end. Okay, now I'm going to start the timer. Got my thumb. I hope you can hear that. Now it's time for our story. And our story is about a story that Jesus told his friends, the disciples. His story was about what is fair and unfair and what being fair looks like to God. He told a story about a person who owned a vineyard. You know how in those apple orchards we were talking about, there are lots of trees with apples in them? Well, in a vineyard, there are lots of grapevines that are growing grapes. And you might have heard that Julia, when she was in North Carolina, went picking, I think, was it cherries and peaches? And Isaac, I think, said his family has gone peach picking in the summer. So there are lots of different things you can go pick in orchards. And I've gone berry picking in the summers too. But of course, our area here and in this month, September, and in the season of fall is famous for apple picking and apple orchards. So I'm going to tell two versions of Jesus' story, like two different tellings. And at the end of both tellings, I'll ask you stuff about how you liked each telling. And this first telling will be about apple picking and how maybe we could all go sometime apple picking. And the second story, and the first story will be about all of us and apple picking nowadays, just like the Gotti family is going to go apple picking today. And the second story will be the story of some people who got a job working with grapes at a grape orchard. Okay, here's the first story. So, one September, maybe next September, all of us here decided to go to an apple orchard on the North Shore to pick apples. We all planned to go on the same day so we could meet each other there. Now, some of us woke up really early and got there just when the orchard opened, and those folks started picking right away. If you want to volunteer to be one of the people in the story getting up early, if you want to volunteer to be one of the getting up early people, type your name in the chat and I'll add you into the story. And meanwhile, while you're typing, I'll show you a picture of what an apple orchard looks like. Oh, let's see. No, I didn't want to print it out because these pictures are very colorful and would use a lot of printer ink. But it's hard to hold up my picture. And you can see the apple there, and you can see a whole row of other apple trees. Oh, so Julia and the Gotti family are going to get up early, and Duncan's going to get up early. Oh, and Nathaniel is going to get up early. So all these folks are going to get up early and get there extra early and start picking right away. Nathaniel and Duncan and the whole Gotti family. And, well, Julia might be thinking about it. She might, with all these people getting there early, she might want to sleep in on that day. And here are some late risers, the Dwilmers, and possibly Julia. Some of us got up later and also got stuck in traffic because some of us had, slept later and didn't end up getting to the orchard until the middle of the day. And if anybody else wants to join the late risers, I'll show you a picture of apple picking while you wait. Here is some apple picking going on. You can see people picking apples and putting them into bags. Oh, Juliet is going to come later. Duncan is one of the early risers. Juliet's coming later in the day. And Nathaniel's getting up early. I don't know about Isaac. And the Gottis are all coming early, and the Dwilmers are all coming in the middle of the day. What about me? When did I come? Oh, Anne has just joined us, and she's a late riser, so she, with the rest of her family, are going to come on the later side to the apple orchard. How about me, though? When am I going to come? Sad story, but absolutely typical of something I do. I got really, really lost while trying to drive to the apple orchard, and I had to stop and ask for directions. And every time I stopped and asked for directions, I got into a conversation with the people I was asking, and I didn't end up getting to the orchard until it was almost closing time. If you want to be like me in the story and get really, really lost on the way there, you can type that in the chat if you want to be late with me, super, super late. Well, by the end of the day, the people who had gotten there early, remember Nathaniel and Duncan and the Gotti family, they had picked all the apples they wanted. And they stopped and they had cider donuts while they waited for the rest of us, for all their friends. And some of the grown-ups there even had coffee. Oh, Johnny says he does not want to be super late like me. I wasn't thrilled about it either. I wish that, it wasn't so easy for me to get lost on the way. But sometimes even with a GPS, I get really lost. And Patrick says, not me. Yeah, no, it would be much more fun if I got there before, quite a bit before closing time. Oh, and the people who got there early picked all the apples they wanted and went and had cider donuts and maybe some cider and maybe some coffee for the grown-ups. Meanwhile, the people who got there later in the middle of the day, like the Dwilmers and Juliet, they ended up with fewer apples because they didn't have quite enough time and had to hurry a bit. And by the time they got finished, there weren't as many cider donuts. They were almost sold out, but there were still some. But how about me? And nobody else is super late as the way I am. It was bad. I got there and the cider donuts were all sold out. And I had only a little time in the orchard because I'd gotten there so late. So, even though I worked as hard as I could and picked as fast as I could, I only got, like 3 apples or 4. But at least it was a nice day and I was with my friends. Well, we were all standing there together, the early risers, the middle risers, and me, the super late person. And we were talking about our day when the owner of the apple orchard came out. And he felt sorry that some of the people didn't have as many apples, and some of them, like me, hardly had any. And some people didn't have as many cider donuts, and I didn't even have a single cider donut. And he said, the apple orchard owner said, guess what? Here are some extra apples from our store and some extra cider donuts from the store. And I'm going to give them to you folks who came in late and you person who came in super duper late. So that was very nice of the apple orchard owner. But when we had all gotten extra apples and donuts, we sat around and talked about whether it was fair or unfair. I mean, was it fair that we all had the same amounts of donuts and apples when some people had gotten to the orchard extra early and had worked all day? And some people had only worked half the day. And then there was me. I hardly worked at all because I had been there so late. And I had gotten free apples and cider donuts, even though I had spent all my time being lost on the road and only gotten to the orchard near closing time. Was that fair? What do you think? It may be hard for you to decide and type an answer in the chat, but if you want, you can just type the word fair or unfair in the chat. And if we all vote, maybe we can see how many people think it's fair and how many people think it's unfair, and maybe voting will show us something, or maybe not. If you don't want to vote here and now, you can also vote by mail. You can ask your grown-ups to help you write me a postcard telling me whether you think it was fair or unfair that the apple orchard owner gave me free apples and donuts so that I had as many as the middle risers and the early risers. And the middle risers got some free apples and donuts too. But I got the most, and I had, the Gotti family or someone in it is saying that it's unfair. Yeah, I can see how you would think that. I don't know if anybody else wants to vote. So, the Nathaniel says it's fair, and maybe Isaac is there too. Oh, Juliet says fair because Jesus says so. That's interesting. Oh, Donal and Johnny think it's fair because it's fun to pick apples, so the early risers had more fun. That's a good point. And I find that it's more fun to work than to wait around somewhere hoping for work or to spend your time lost on the roads. Oh, Julia says it's not fair. Okay. And she's even got a little emoji there to signal her disapproval of the unfairness. So you can keep voting in the chat, but I'm going to, meanwhile, tell you the second story, or the second telling of the same story. Once upon a time, there was someone who owned a grape orchard. A grape orchard is called a vineyard. Here is a picture of a grape orchard. You can see all those dark grapes. Those look like they're going to be purple, not green grapes on the side there. And all down the row are more grapevines, and it's called a vineyard. Oh, and I can show you a picture of some people picking grapes. Here they are. Anyway, in this story, the vineyard owner went up to some people who were waiting around in a marketplace looking for a job and said, "Please help work in my vineyard today, and I will pay you $10 whole. Oh, I see that Matt thinks it's fair because it wasn't my fault that I got lost. Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, the vineyard, Julia points out that in the story of the vineyard, people are going to get paid in $10 whole, not just in apples or cider donuts. That is a difference. And Julia shares that Ella has recently learned the word fair, and "that's not fair" is now a common phrase in their house. Yes, I hear fair and unfair every day a lot, and have for a number of years now. Anyway, the vineyard owner said, "I will pay you $10 whole if you'll come work in my vineyard today." And they said, "Sure." Now, halfway through the day, the vineyard owner saw some other people looking and looking like they needed work, and he invited them to work in his vineyard. And they said, "Sure. It's much better to work than to just hang around looking for work." And near the end of the day, the vineyard owner came out again, and he saw a few more people and invited them in to work in his vineyard, even though the day was almost over. And those people said, "Sure." Well, when the day finally ended, the vineyard owner went and paid $10 whole to every single person who had worked in the vineyard. Now, you would have thought that this would have made everybody happy, right? Because now at the end of the day, they had $10 whole. But no, they were not happy. Instead, the people who had been working in the vineyard all day said, "Hey, that's not fair. How come we who worked all day don't get more than those other people?" And the people who had worked half the day said, "Well then, how come we don't get more than the people who arrived super duper late? That's not fair." Now, if you want, you can type in the chat whether you think it's fair or unfair that everybody got paid the same. I'll also share with you that at the time of the story, people weren't paid in dollars. They were paid probably in denarii. And they probably only got 1 denarii per day, but it's okay. So while if you want to decide whether it's fair or unfair what happened in the vineyard, and you can decide whether to type it in the chat or not, or tell me later. Oh, JT says he thinks what happened in the vineyard is unfair and that it's hard for me to accept. But Jesus says that God is unfair, and Donal thinks it's fair. Bethany and Sandro say fair, and Mommy and Autumn say unfair. And Kate says fair. Well, I'll tell you what I'm voting for, because I'm a late arrival to the apple orchard and to the vineyard. And I kind of like the way it works out, that, for me. I'll have to think about whether it's fair, and maybe I'll figure it out and tell you at the end of the story what I would vote for. Patrick says it's fair. Oh, and Julia says it's fair. And she said to JT that she wants to think it's fair, but sometimes she's not sure, thinks it isn't fair. And JT is sharing a story about some monkeys and cucumbers. Oh, and Johnny is thinking some more, and he says it's unfair because if someone works more, they should get more. Oh, and JT's telling us that the capuchin monkeys in the story with the cucumber got angry if other monkeys got more. And they showed their anger by throwing the cucumbers in the scientists' faces. They not only got angry, and they didn't say it's not fair, they actually threw the cucumber at the people who were running the experiment. Okay, I'm going to just do a public service announcement here and I will ask you or invite you that if something happens that you think is unfair, could you please think about whether it might be a good idea to say it's not fair rather than throw a cucumber at somebody? Because I don't really think it's good to throw cucumbers or other food, unless it's part of some game that, I don't know. Think before you throw. So I'm going to tell you what the vineyard owner said. Oh, Anne says that it's maybe unfair that some got paid for less work, but it is fair that everyone had something to eat at the end of the day. But I'll tell you now what the vineyard owner said. The vineyard owner asked, why are you early folks complaining? You agreed to work all day for the $10 whole, and you got them. It's true that the other people didn't get here as early, but if I decide to be generous to them, why should you be cranky about it? Why should you be like the capuchin monkeys and the cucumber that JT told us about? Oh, Juliet, she says her monkey doesn't have access to a cucumber, so we're okay. I'm so relieved. Because, after hearing JT's story, I'm worried about any monkeys who might have cucumbers around them. So the vineyard owner says, why should the rest of you be cranky if I'm generous to everybody? And then Jesus, who'd been telling the story to his friends, told them that in the kingdom of God, God is generous to everybody, whether they come early or late. And, Jesus said, it's possible, in fact, likely, that some of the people who come last would come first with God. That is a difficult concept. But we do know from other stories in the Bible, and perhaps from our own experiences in the world, that sometimes God can be radically generous, just generous without any sense that there's any shortage of anything. And, Jesus tells us that with God, there isn't any shortage. There's enough apples and cider donuts and work and whatever is needed to go around. I am copying JT's link to the experiment with the monkeys and the cucumbers. Next time I tell the story, I want to add a third telling with monkeys and cucumbers, because that really caught my fancy. Okay, now I have a bunch of questions for you. Julia says that perhaps the point is that comparison isn't a good method. The point may be that people's needs are met, maybe. So I am going to ask you all what you think. Do you think that God is fair or unfair if he is generous to everyone who comes to him? What if I get really lost on my way to God and end up with God super duper late, the same way that I was late to the apple orchard? Do you think God should be less generous with me to make it sort of all even out so that everybody gets, I don't know. Matt points out that when this story gets told in Central American churches, it gets cheers because people there believe it's hard to be unemployed as well as employed. That was my take on it because years ago I lived in Los Angeles where there were people, usually Latin American immigrants, who were looking for work, and they would hang out in parking lots and wait for white gringo folks to drive by and give them a lift, and then they would garden in the richer people's yards. And it was no fun to be there in the hot sun waiting for work. And I often thought that although you have to work in the hot sun, it would be a lot better to work and have something to do than to wait in the parking lot, hoping to be hired, not knowing what was going to happen to you that day, having no certainty or security. I find work a lot more pleasant than waiting, but maybe you feel differently. So back to my questions. I'm going to ask them sort of quick because we're running out of time. Here's some easier questions than whether it's fair or unfair. Did you like both tellings of the story? Did you like one telling better than another? Did you like the story with the apple orchard better, the one with the vineyard, just the way I told it? I spent more time on the apple orchard story and used more words. So if you liked one, it might have just been the way I told it. Did you think the stories were alike or were they really different? And Nathaniel first said it was fair for both tellings, but now Nathaniel thinks it's unfair. Yeah, it's something we have to sort of think about all the time, whether it's fair or unfair. What if our ideas of what is fair look different to other people? Or what if they look different to God? It's good to have these ideas of fair and unfair always present and in play, and we can change our vote at any time. Here's an even easier question. If you could eat apples or grapes right this minute, which would you choose? Or would you like to eat both? Here are some comments in the chat. Nathaniel, I read that. Johnny says that also not only is it hard to wait in the hot sun, but if it's cold, it's hard to wait in the cold also. That is so true. JT thought the stories were different because apple picking is fun and working all day in the vineyard for enough to eat is hard. Juliet and Duncan like the vineyard version. Patrick likes the apple version better because he's in the story. Duncan sent us an emoji saying no bicycles. Thank you. Johnny liked both stories. Donal likes both. Patrick had to think about it, but then decided he liked both. JT thinks that grapes are tastier than cucumbers. And Kate says, grapes, definitely. Grapes, grapes, grapes. Wow, that is a lot of passion behind the grapes. Meanwhile, Duncan says apples. Julia says grapes, but that could be because she's from the West Coast and there's a lot of grapes there. Though there's apples in Washington also. I like both. So we've run out of time. And I'm going to thank you for listening to my stories. And if you want to vote or tell me what is fair, unfair, and we've run out of time. Oh, Matt is voting for grapes. Oh, and Kate is saying that the passionate grape in favor of grapes response was Nathaniel. So Kate may be more open to apples. Anyway, if you want to vote after the story's ended, you can ask your grown-ups to help you tell me by mail or email or text or phone call. And if you're writing already, you can also tell me anything else you like about the stories or about fruit and anything else that occurs to you. And now it's time for us to say goodbye. You can hold up your hand like this to wish everyone peace. And I'm wishing you all peace. See, here's my hand. Peace. Peace, everyone. Bye.